15. There, that's her. It must be, Quentin said, his arm draped over a crouched Cal. He pointed to a woman dressed in simple yet elegant clothing, a long blue cloak trimmed with embroidery that no dock worker could afford. When's the last time you saw a docker with nails that clean? Cal shrugged him off. That's what you said about the last two people we followed. Your lack of faith wounds me, dear boy. You haven't exactly been pulling your weight. I led you to dredge, did I not? Led us into a viper's nest, more like. Cal held up his hand, shushing Quentin's response, and tried to listen on the conversation ahead. The assistant they'd been following had stopped off in several different locations, each time offering a few coins or simply listening to the woes of the downtrodden. Odd to see someone genuinely helping others and asking for nothing in return. The beauty of Yundis was plain to see. Its tall white buildings, manors and governmental buildings alike, shone in the inner ring of the city. Even those that sat on the outer rings were nicer than most of the buildings Cal had been to in Igni. Hand-painted murals spread across the walls. Colorful banners ran between the many planted trees that littered the streets. On the surface, Yundis was a jewel. That beauty didn't fool Cal. Just like any other city, Yundis had its secrets. The elite here cared only for themselves. In Igni, the Stokes had served as the central market, a place where people from across the city would gather to ogle at the wares being hawked by the many merchants. Chaotic as it had been, the Stokes had a sense of community, one that bled into the rest of the city. But here in Yundis, things were different. There was no central market. There was no intermingling of the classes. The rich stayed in their manors and palaces, feasting, while hollow-born servants scrubbed their floors. What would Leif think of him if he could see him now? He knew the kind of person Cal had to become, what he'd done to survive. Seems our lady friend has arrived at her next destination. Look. Quentin pointed ahead to the assistant. Sure enough, she had stopped on the entry steps to a large three-story building. Children, emaciated and wearing dirty rags, sat around the steps. All were looking up and giggling at the sight of the assistant, as if the sight of her was something to celebrate. An older-looking teenager opened the door, immediately shooing away the noisy children, causing a few of them to poke out their tongues in response. Is she in? The assistant asked. I'm here to deliver Lord Udican's donation. Of course, the teenager replied, his face lit with joy. I'll tell her right away. The assistant giggled as the teenager ran back inside and then turned her attention to the children, who had gathered on the steps behind her. Did you bring any? One of them bleated, followed quickly by a chorus of imitation. The children yipped with glee as the assistant pulled several large sweet pastries from her satchel. Frosting soon smeared gap-toothed grins as these littles devoured the treats. It seems our official is a shrewd man indeed. Some people aren't decent, Cal bit back. Come on, Cal. When was the last time you saw anybody do anything without expecting something in return? The name burned Cal's tongue. Leif. The embodiment of kindness. What would he think of Cal now, were he to see him? And what he'd done to survive? What he'd become? I didn't think so, Quentin purred after a silence. This is a clear example of someone playing the long game. Charity to the outside observer, but to the trained eye, A future proofing tactic. Feed the poor and the needy when they're young, and you can guarantee future support. Calculating indeed. You don't know that. He could actually care. Quentin placed his hand over on his heart, his expression shifting to pantomimic sympathy. Oh, to be so young and naive. No, Cal, there are no nice people in the world. There are only those who use and those who are used. A young woman emerged from the building before Cal could speak. Her waist long brown hair, tucked behind her ears, framed a face half lost to burns. Milky clouds covered her left eye, the iris obscured by her eyelid stuck halfway closed. But her right eye, brown and retaining a kindness apparent even from afar, locked onto the assistant with startling warmth. Cal's heart jumped into his throat as he stared at the girl. She took the assistant's hand in her own, the skin mottled by long healed burn scars and bearing no brand. Memories flooded his thoughts. A young girl terrified of becoming a hollowborn like him. Of that same young girl beating the chest of a prefect as he dragged her away from her home. Now here she stood, saving others. Cal breathed hard and whispered, Prissa, it's so good to see you again, Prissa said with a softness that belied the trauma she had endured. I'm eternally grateful for Lord Udican's help. He's been so good to us here. It's to you he extends his gratitude. The things you've done here, for one so young, even after The assistant stopped herself and turned her gaze downward as if shamed by the thought. Lord Udican wishes to extend his apologies. He regrets that his support for your kind must remain discreet. Prissa's smile wavered. She breathed deep, composed herself. That's quite all right. I know what I am, what they could become. Prissa gestured to the children around them. Lord Udican works hard to improve the lives of all Udins and Yundis, and beyond, Hollowborn and Giftling alike. Please, let him know that I shall be along as soon as I can break away from my duties here. As gracious as ever, the assistant said, smiling back. You still have the key to the back door? She added, looking sheepish again. Prissa nodded. Safe in my office. Very good, the assistant replied, giving Prissa one final hug before bidding her and the children farewell. Prissa crouched down to the children, poking and prodding some of the younger ones playfully. Miss Prissa, one of the older-looking children chimed. What's a hollowborn? Prissa placed her hand on her chest and chuckled. A person who can't feel the gift around them. I can't feel anything, another one of the children peeped. Does that mean I'm one? Prissa comforted the children, reassuring them that hollowborns are people just like anyone else. Cal's heart sank as she led the children back inside. Quentin scoffed beside him. This Lord Udican has those orphans wrapped around his little finger. Such a waste. Don't you think so? That girl would be pretty, if not for those hideous scars. Cal gritted his teeth, his fingernails digging into his palms. But at least we know we're onto something, eh, Cal? Quentin continued, oblivious to Cal's feelings. Cal stood and turned toward Quentin, breathing deeply through his nose, resisting the urge to draw his blade. I'm not so sure I'll be of much help in there, my boy, Quentin continued, but perhaps I can cause some sort of distraction out here. You slip in, grab the key. Do it, Cal spat. He needed Quentin gone before the tremor in his hands became visible. The orphanage wall yielded to Cal's practiced climb. Within seconds, Cal reached the window in question, and he clambered in as silently as possible. Several beds lined the sides of the room, each occupied by a tiny, snoring mound. Cal ghosted past, tensing every time a floorboard creaked under his weight. He turned the handle on the bedroom door as silently as he could and made his way into the corridor. Cal braced himself against the wall, dipping into the shadows as footsteps plodded up a nearby staircase. He watched, frozen in place, as Prissa climbed the steps to the upper floors, humming to herself. The lack of light fixtures on the walls made creeping through the corridors easy enough, but Cal didn't dare get too close. He feared Prissa would somehow sense his presence, sense his guilt. A huge part of him wanted her to turn around and look at him, to catch him in the act. Cal's lips parted, and more than once he had to catch himself before calling out to her. Eventually, Prissa entered another room. A placard next to the door read, Headmaster's Office. Cal braced himself on the side of the door and tried to think of a way he could get inside without being seen. The more he thought about it, the more he realized the only way to get that done with Prissa in the room was to knock her unconscious. Getting in and incapacitating her before she had the chance to turn around would be easy enough. But the more he considered it, the worse he felt. Again, he reminded himself that he had a job to do, and that right now, Prissa was in the way of him completing that mission. No key meant no deal with Dredge. No deal with Dredge meant no weapons for the rebellion. And without those weapons, Cal's goal of getting to the Lord Inquisitor would be nigh on impossible. Even he had to accept that. Despite all this, Cal couldn't move. His legs were frozen in place. He noticed how loud he was breathing, the beads of sweat that ran down the side of his face. He had to get in that room. But he couldn't. Prissa wasn't a prefect. She wasn't a Daven. She was Prissa. He couldn't do it. His heart leaped into his throat as the door to the office swung open. On reflex, he dipped into the shadows, pressing himself as hard as he could against the wall without making a sound. His whole body tensed as Prissa walked past him, heading back down the stairs. He waited as the soft thump of her feet drew farther and farther away. Letting out a long sigh, Cal pushed himself off the wall and made his way into Prissa's office. Its layout was simple, unassuming. Messy stacks of paper and open folders adorned a central desk, a set of insect-eaten chairs placed around it. A simple bed, with neatly tucked-in corners, occupied the corner closest to the door. Large wooden beams ran overhead, reaching from the door side of the room to an enormous circular window. Years of muck and grime build up, making the glass opaque. No shelves or bookcases within the room offered additional storage. For a headmaster's office, it was bare, either a testament to the lack of use or the lack of funding. Cal passed a glance over the missives and papers strewn across the top of the desk. Handwritten documents on the different children that lived here, each with their name and various other specifics. Cal found them difficult to look at. The room already reminded him of Leif's old office. The layout was entirely different, but the sparseness was the same. The obvious dedication, the same. He turned his attention to the drawers and searched through the ones that were unlocked. Inside, he found a few crumpled letters. One in particular stood out to him. It was from someone named Lord Dreeroyne. Its contents promised Prissa unlimited funding if she would cooperate in spying on Lord Udican. Guilt rippled through Cal as he wondered just how much trouble Prissa was in with Eunice's elite. Several other crumpled letters from the same Lord Dreeroyne repeated the same request, each less flattering than the last. The last drawer held firm as Cal pulled on it. Locked in place. Cal had no choice. He drew his dagger, braced it between the drawer's lock and the desk's wooden frame, and broke the lock with a satisfying pop. Leaving a trail wasn't exactly ideal, but as long as no one saw him, then tracing it back to him or the rebellion would be impossible. Besides, sooner or later Eunice's elite would know of this deception, and if they were anything like Cal expected them to be, they'd just point blame at one another, whilst secretly relishing the fact that Lord Udican was no longer around. Inside sat an ornate key with a simple note attached. The note read, "My dearest Prissa, I work for the day when all Udens, be they hollowborn or giftling, are treated as equals and the need for our secret has passed. But until that day comes, please take this and know that my door and my heart are always open to you." Cal swallowed against the growing lump in his throat as he put the note back and pocketed the estate key. He closed the drawer as best he could and crept toward the door. Panic fueled Cal's movements as the doorknob began to turn. He leaped onto the desk and vaulted onto the ceiling beam, pushing himself low and into the shadows once again. His heart pounded as Prissa entered the room, looking back and calling out to someone. "I'll be right there. I just need something from my desk," she said. Cal watched her from above, stayed as still as possible, begging her not to look up. The situation was almost funny. Cal had fought prefects and brawled with inquisitors. He'd been outnumbered by his opponents more times than he cared to remember. But the thought of Prissa seeing him as he was, it terrified him. Prissa crossed the room and slumped into her chair. She threw down the papers in her hands and thumbed her temples. Stamped red lettering covered the front of the topmost discarded paper. Notice of relocation. Making out the writing underneath the dominant red stamp was difficult from where he was positioned, but it seemed the prefects were aware of Prissa's orphanage. It wasn't uncommon for prefects to declare buildings havens for the rebellion and have them seized. But why an orphanage? Did this have something to do with Lord Udican's enemies in court? Prissa sighed, a deep, aging sigh that made her sound older. "I wonder if Leif ever had to deal with this." A knock on the door drew her and Cal's attention. An older woman entered, likely another volunteer. Cal thought, "Sorry to disturb you, Prissa." Prissa made a clear effort to recompose herself. "No, it's fine. What's the matter?" "Well, there's a strange man at the door. He says he's lost, so we gave him directions. Only now he won't leave. He seems harmless enough. A little odd, maybe. What should we do?" "Bring him inside and offer him something to eat and drink if we can spare it. I'll speak with him." The woman nodded in response and closed the door as she left. With one last quick sigh, Prissa took the papers from her desk and reached for the drawers. She paused, her scarred fingers tracing the broken lock. "Hello? Is someone there?" she asked. There was no hint of fear in her voice. "It's all right. You don't have to hide. I won't call the prefects. I promise." Instead, her voice carried a softness to it, a sincerity. Cal didn't move. He stared down at Prissa, silent and listening. "I know must be hard. Believe me, I've been there. But it's okay. You don't have to steal to survive. If you let me, I can help you." Cal dug his fingers into the wooden beam. "Please, let me help you." Her words, her kindness, were a dagger in his chest. Prissa waited for a response, her hands clutched against her chest. After a few moments of waiting and searching, her shoulders slumped and her hands dropped to her sides. Okay, I get it. You're scared. Surviving is all you know. The edges of Cal's vision began to blur. Here, Prissa continued. She unlatched the large circular window and pushed it open. A stiff breeze rushed into the room, the smell of sea salt filling the space. You can get out through here. That way you can stay hidden, and you won't scare the children. She moved to the front of her desk, reached into a pocket of her dress, and separated a small bundle of coins from the donation Lord Udican's assistant had given her earlier. Sorry it's not much. We don't have a lot to spare, but it should be enough to get you something to eat tonight. Cal's body felt limp. His muscles shook. The beam underneath him creaked as he shifted his weight. Prissa spun on the spot, her hands still reaching for the doorknob. She took a tentative step back into the room, and Cal shifted back on the beam. All right, I'm sorry, she said, stopping in her tracks. I won't come any closer. She turned and opened the door, pausing before looking back. Next time, please come through the front. I'd really like to meet you. With one last smile, she exited the room, the door latch clicking shut behind her. Cal dropped down, knees hitting hardwood, the key gripped in his hand. After what seemed like forever, he picked himself up and walked over to the open window, readying himself to climb out. Braced against the window's frame, he turned back and stared at the meager pile of coins Prissa had left on the desk, his breathing coming fast and shallow. How could she have shown him such kindness? Someone she knew was stealing from her? After everything that had happened, after everything she had lost, she had chosen kindness. Cal seethed as he drove his fist into the window frame, the impact sending a jolt up his arm. Getting his breathing back under control, Cal walked to Prissa's desk and pulled out the coin pouch from around his neck. He opened it and stared at the scratched, faded coins that Ovette had collected over the years. He remembered how happy she had been every time she added another coin to her collection. The savings, she'd called it. Cal had asked her what she was saving for. She'd always shrugged her shoulders and answered, For something special. Cal closed his eyes, squeezing out the last vestige of any real emotion he'd felt in so long. For a moment, he wished for easier times, to be back in the hideout with Ovette. He tipped the contents of the coin pouch onto the table, adding Ovette's savings to Prissa's pile. He whispered, I'm sorry, and made his way out of the window. Cal sat with his head in his hands, the dark alleyway shrouding him in shadow, helping him disappear from the world. Boots clacked on the cobblestone, and Quentin rounded a corner, looking pleased with himself. Ah, Cal, there you are, Quentin smirked. Were you successful? Cal held up the ornate key he'd taken from Prissa's desk. So simple an object, and yet the sight of it churned his stomach. He flung the key at Quentin, fingers still shaking. Excellent. Quentin pocketed the key and turned back to look at the orphanage, hands on his hips. It's a shame, really. Framing this Lord Udican will likely mean the end of places like this. The prefects of Eunice do not treat captured rebels kindly. Cal tried to ignore him, tried to focus on the damp cobblestones beneath him, and the distant murmur of the city. Anything but Prissa's face. The scared little girl, grown into a confident and headstrong woman, kind and pure despite everything. Leif would have been proud of her. Cal was. Oh well, the mission must come first, right? Quentin clapped Cal's shoulder, snapping him out of his stupor. We should go. Cal's voice wavered. He swallowed hard. I. I don't. He stopped himself, shook his head, and balled his fists, shook the image of his old life from his mind. It was a distraction, nothing more. Not useful, not helpful. He stood and purposefully strode away from the orphanage. We need to meet the others. Come on. He dared not look back. Couldn't. He wasn't that person anymore. He didn't deserve to be. He was a thief, a rebel, a killer. And killers didn't look back.